Good morning and happy Sunday. We're here with another episode of our weekly podcast that we do where we discuss video games, discuss modern games, retro games, do a fun little silly game where we just have a look at just three games and also plan to do a sort of more in-depth look at something that has to do video game related. So right now, and probably for the next several weeks, months actually, I'll be doing just breaking down the years in gaming. So for anybody that's coming in, listening new, that's what we've been doing here, and just trying to have a casual chat about video games. So we left off last year, 1989. So I'll be breaking down the year 1990 this time. Um, some of the resources that I was pulling for the previous years don't go past 1989, so I had to look at some other stuff here as far as where to try to get some of my information. So I might be a little bit more sparse on some of the more detailed information that I can provide here. But the nice thing though is that this is really where I'm starting to remember or where I was conscious of a lot of things happening on in the video game industry. So I might even be able to have some personal feedback, right? And all that I can sort of fill in the gaps from maybe some information that I couldn't find completely online. And then another thing too also is, as you know, because again, back then, sometimes game releases from one territory to another was more delayed, sometimes up to a year. And so some of the video game releases I might get a little bit wrong, as some of it might be from when they were released in Japan, for example, and other times here in North America. So I'm trying to do my best as far as, trying to accurately portray the years that they came out in. But really when I'm doing this, I'm just sort of like really quickly just researching some really quick things and all that and piecing it all together. So it's kind of fly off the cuff sort of little show that I do here. So again, if you're new listening in and all, first of all, thank you. And second of all, this is very much more of a casual show about discussing video games. Well, I do try to get as many information and correctly as possible. I'm not trying to come across as someone that is, like a 100% accurate video game historian or anything like that. It's just more like, like if you're talking with your buddies and all, you're like, oh yeah, talking video games, and yeah, that game came out on this year, and maybe you might be wrong, and all. So definitely feel free to fact check me and all if I got something wrong. As again, I'm trying to do this more off of just my own memory and all, and then just some really quick research that I do for like maybe half an hour throughout the week, so that's really what this is all about. But we're getting closer to Halloween, so that's pretty exciting, as I think this week is where I'll really start trying to play some more spookier games, and as we start getting, closer to the Halloween time. Halloween falls on a Friday this year, on a Friday. We don't have a whole lot planned this year. Ultimately, I think we're just going to do like a trunk or treat at my daughter's school. And so we're not really doing anything too crazy for costumes. We're just doing, my daughters wanted to be pop stars, probably because of K-pop Demon Hunter and how, they're really obsessed with that show. And so my wife and I, we just decided to get like I'll be a Papa Razzi, and she'll be like a mama journalist or something to that effect. And so my wife and I, we're just getting like some simple shirts, but they'll get a little bit more of the costumes, as that's really all we have planned for Halloween this year. But still, I just love this time of the year and all. It's just always fun to partake in the movies, watch some scary movies and things like that, and all. Sounds a little demented, but, it's fun. um, but yeah, so hopefully everyone had a great week. Mine wasn't too bad, fairly uneventful, I guess, which, sometimes that can be a good thing. I'm a little bit tired though. I didn't get a whole lot of sleep last night. So we're still trying to sleep train one of my daughters, and my youngest one. And so so a lot of times actually we'll have to sleep in the same bedroom as her. And so my wife and I will alternate, and they just have like their little beds in their room, and also they're not the most comfortable and all. Yeah, sometimes I wake up just, kind of exhausted and just didn't get a whole lot of sleep last night. But got my little protein matcha latte thing from Starbucks, so hopefully that'll pep me up a little bit here. But yeah, let's get to it. So I started doing something different with the relay of gaming. So I was talking about it last episode that I was seeing if I can go a different route. And so far I think this has been working out a lot better. What I started doing on my YouTube channel, so I try to spruce it up a little bit more, put a description in there, made um, give myself like a little profile picture and a background and all that. And so, I've talked about and all that. I'm not. I don't like the usage of AI and all that, but my profile pic, it is an AI one where basically I just took a picture of myself and then just put it over like a cartoon AI like cartoon AI filter. And I was like, all right, I'll call it good on that. I couldn't really think of what else to do for like my profile picture. And then the backdrop that I have on there is just like the black grid with the white, or the black backdrop with the white grid lines. And basically that's just to sort of mimic the Sega Genesis box cartridges from, early on in the Sega Genesis's lifetime. I always think that those cases were the best ever. And so just sort of a little homage to that. But what I've been doing though is, so this thing that I've been doing right and all, where I just randomly select some games and all. Okay, little interruption there. Sorry, not sure where I left off, but the um so for the relay of gaming thing that I've been doing, so basically, so on my YouTube channel, so I'll still pick the three games and talk about them like normal here. But what I've been doing on my YouTube channel is that I just throughout this past week, I've been selecting one game per day, and then whatever game I start off with, or whatever game I choose, I'll make like a short. So I've been messing around with doing like YouTube shorts, and just doing like either like a little mini review if it's a game that I'm pretty familiar with. So I've been labeling them like mini review and then whatever game. Or I've been doing like in the backlog, so a game that I'll talk about still also, but just kind of more in a way like saying like, yeah, this game looks interesting. This is what I know about it. Looking forward to play it, or at some point, or something along the lines of that. So for like this past week, I had Super Mario Brothers, Bad Dudes, Panzer Dragoon, the 2020 remake, Super Castlevania 4, and excuse me, and Star Fox Adventures. So that's been fun. It's just kind of a way that I can get some thoughts out on a game, and I'll not just record like really quick gameplay footage of it. So nothing too fancy and all, but yeah, it's been fun though, because I like writing a lot, and so I've just been writing like these quick little mini scripts. It doesn't take me that long to write them and all, and so it doesn't take up a whole lot of time, and so that's why I kind of like doing this format here, and just kind of gets my thoughts out on a certain game and all, but without having to dedicate a whole lot of time to it. So we'll continue with that. So I think what I'm going to do for this week, so I'm still going to pick the three games, and we'll talk about them just like normal and all. But then those will be the first three games that I'll post for this week on my, again, as YouTube Shorts. So I'll post one today. The second game I picked today, I'll post it tomorrow. And the third one on Tuesday. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I'll still pick one game per day on that and just kind of go like that. So see how that goes. But anyway, that's just my thought. Um, but yeah, let's see. So let's get going here, and starting off for this week's selection of games. Let's see here. Added some more games too also, so okay, so 1,222. Let's see what that brings up. And we have, ooh, Uncharted, Drake's Fortune. Okay. Okay, let's go with the next one. $376. See what that is here. Ah, Final Fantasy 13. Okay. Interesting pick so far. And for the last one. $658. Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker. Okay. All right. Interesting choices here. So, okay, so I have some familiarity with all these three games. So let's start talking about these here. These will be interesting to grab a little bit of gameplay footage onto also. But yeah, so Uncharted Drake's Fortune. So this game by Naughty Dog, and so so this game came out in 2007, so towards the end of that year there, that was a really great year because we had a lot of games that were so we're still fairly young in the seventh generation, and we had a lot of great new franchises that started this year, and not only that, but there were also franchises from Western developers. So we were starting to see a shift in, at least at the time, with how the more popular video games, right? Where for many years it was usually the games developed from Japan. But this year it started, kind of like doing a big shift over towards games published or developed here in the, like in the Western part of the world. And now we had already been seeing some successes and all that, right? But I feel like this year was really great though for that. One of the series that started this year, and eventually became a really big series, was Uncharted. And so this game again came out on the PlayStation 3 and all. And so originally they were showing off concepts of this game fairly early on when the PlayStation 3, shortly after it got announced. And so, they were showing how it was a game from Naughty Dog, right? Who they'd already been doing the Jack and Daxter and the Crash Bandicoot games. But this is kind of a more realistic kind of game where it's kind of, I mean, Uncharted is sort of a blend of like Indiana Jones slash Lara Croft slash James Bond almost, and it's so a bit more of a grounded character, right, and all, as opposed to like, you know having more like a mascot kind of character like Crash Bandicoot or even Jack and Daxter. But yeah, I mean, the first game, I still really enjoyed this one. It seems to get a little bit of a bad rep nowadays, but I still find it very playable and very fun. This one focuses more where you are on an island jungle setting and doesn't really change too much as far as its setting goes. I mean, towards the end of the game and all, it does kind of change a little bit, but for the most part, it keeps it within that sort of setting there, and which is fun and all because it definitely brings out the sort of tomb raiding, sort of atmosphere of the game and all. Not to take away from Lara Croft's adventures, but unlike Lara Croft, though, this one, it's a little light on puzzles. Doesn't have too much puzzles in it. Where the gameplay seems to be more on the platforming or the wall scaling, really, and then the gunplay on it. And for the most part, I think that's done fairly well. The AI on the enemies can be a little off, but for the most part, I still think it's good. It's still a fun game. I still really enjoyed this game a lot, and at the time, it was definitely a looker for the PlayStation 3. Nowadays, that original version, it kind of chugs a little bit, like it tries to hit a 20 frames per second, but I'm sorry, 30 frames, but seems like it rarely hits that. And but just the texture details and all that, I mean, it was we were starting to get to see how graphics can be more realistic like and all, and there was some pretty cool technology that Naughty Dog was utilizing at that time. But it is one of those games where the first one, when it came out in 2007, it was pretty impressive looking, but then immediately technology was still advancing. That just 2 years later, the sequel, the Among Thieves, looked considerably better, right? So, so it is a little bit rough around the edges, but it's still nice though. And I mean, really, the version you'll want to play, and probably the one that's more accessible, is going to be the on the Drake Uncharted collection, which is on the PlayStation 4, and it has 1, 2, and 3 remastered, and it bumps it up to 60 frames per second and all, and then it's compatible with the PlayStation 5. So that'd be really the one to get, because again, it cleans up the graphics and kind of cleans up where there was on the original one, there was like these textures disappearing and all. Like probably the more famous one is on one of the very first sections of the game on Sully, one of the characters in it. You can see him come into frame, and then his shirt looks all bland, and then the textures of the shirt load in, so it looks a little off at first. And also, you see that randomly throughout the game, and all, where like the remaster one cleans a lot of that up. But yeah, classic game. I mean, definitely became one of the premier PlayStation franchises, at least more with the PlayStation 3, and I mean, Nathan Drake became a very iconic character pretty quickly on. Definitely helped out by the voice talents of Nolan North. Yeah, I mean, he did just an amazing job as Nathan Drake, and really gave a I mean, a very fun voice to that character, right? That made him extremely likable pretty early on. And yeah, just a fun game to play through. And then the rest of the cast, oh, I forgot the names of the actors for Sully and Elena Fisher and some of the other cast. But yeah, they all do really great. And it's just fun listening to their banter, where the story, it's at least in this one, it's definitely more of a fun adventure. I mean, it has some serious moments and some, the acting in it is pretty good. Also has oh, I think his name is Simon Templeton. I could get that name wrong, but he's the voice actor for anybody that's been around gaming for a while, that did the voice of Kane for the Legacy of the Blood Omen Legacy of Kane games. So it was really cool to hear his voice, right, as one of the bad guys in this. And again, if you've been playing games for a while and you'll recognize that voice right away, I was like, oh, that's Kane. But yeah, great game. It's just right in length. You can beat it roughly in about 7, 8 hours or so, give or take. And the gameplay is pretty varied. Even though it takes all place on one island, the settings are still varied enough and all that. And as far as what you're doing too, also for gameplay, that it keeps things fairly interesting throughout the whole adventure. And yeah, I mean, you'll have fun with it. It's definitely a blast. And if you've never played the Uncharted series for a while, then definitely start here. I mean, the yeah, I mean, you don't have to. I think you'd probably already hear that part two is the more popular one, and for me, it is. But the stories, I mean, they are connected, but they're loosely connected. So, I mean, you'll miss out on a few, I guess, emotional moments that pay off a little bit in the later games. Especially the fourth one. If you are interested in the game series at all, right, I definitely recommend playing the first three, right, so that way the whole series ends in part four really pays off more. But the first three and all, I mean, they are connected and all, and I do recommend playing all of them, one, two, and three. But they are just loosely based, so I mean, you could start off on two or three and all that, but I feel you'd get a little bit more if you play, start from the first one, and that way you can kind of see how the gameplay and the graphics evolve too, also from there. But yeah, very fun game, and yeah, it'll be fun to talk about that game here sometime or probably sometime later today. But yeah, let's see. So the next one is Final Fantasy 13. Hmm. Final Fantasy 13. So this game came out in 2000, I think around March or so of 2010. Final Fantasy, I mean, it's my favorite series of all time, right? But that's mainly because of the stretch that we had from like Final Fantasy 6, which came out, and again, here in North America, right? But from 1994 till Final Fantasy 10, which was in 2001. So that's what, 6, 7 year stretch right there. We had these amazing, amazing Final Fantasy games. And then when I've gone back and played the earlier ones, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, they're good too also, right? They're definitely good. But from 6 through 10 in that time frame right there, absolutely amazing. But then Final Fantasy kind of started going off in a little bit of a different direction. And there was Final Fantasy 11, which was an online multiplayer, which at the time, I think, it sounds like it was a decent game, for what it was. And then we had Final Fantasy 12 in 2006, it's a good game too also, right? But kind of started seeming to lose a bit of its identity and all, I mean, I mean, it's a fine game and all. It's just, again, there's certain expectations and all, I guess, that we had as Final Fantasy fans and all, that we were starting to kind of lose with that. So then we had Final Fantasy 13, which was to come out on the PlayStation 3, and then it also got announced for the Xbox 360. Excuse me. And so this game was stuck in development hell for a while. So my understanding of what ended up happening was that they were getting a little ambitious with what they wanted to do with this universe that they were creating with Final Fantasy 13. There was like a project, and it was called like Fabulous Crystallis something something. And so ultimately what I understand was that there was going to be multiple Final Fantasy games that were all set in a kind of a similar universe, but they were going to be like different games, like maybe different gameplay styles, or I'm not entirely sure the whole story on that. But eventually what ended up happening was that they kind of, as they started getting more focused on what they wanted to do, Final Fantasy 13 started becoming its own thing, and there was also a delay in the game too, also because they were having some issues, I believe, with the graphics engine that was running it. I believe the one that they stuck with was called like the Crystal Luminous engine, something to that effect. I could be wrong, but it seems like they were having some kind of issues with however they were trying to optimize the game on whatever game graphics engines they were messing around with. And then this whole project of Fabulous Crystallis or whatever it was called, I don't know how much of that ended up going into the Final Fantasy 13 sequels, because there was 13-2, 13-3, or Lightning Returns, the third one, whatever it's called. And then also a part of that ended up becoming what we know now as Final Fantasy 15. And then that game didn't come out until 2016. So that stretch right there from like after 2006, after Final Fantasy 12 came out until 2016. So those 10 years, Final Fantasy was in this weird sort of era, right? And all where they were experimenting with things, and then they were, there was a lot of development issues with, with the games that they were trying to come out with and all. So it's kind of a weird, kind of a dark time, I guess you can say, for Final Fantasy. But ultimately, the game that we got, Final Fantasy 13, right? And so I remember I was trying to be hyped for it, right? Because I was like, okay, 12 was good, but it was, a little bit of a letdown, maybe 13, right? And so when they were showing screenshots of it and all, I mean, the graphics looked pretty impressive. The character designs looked a little different, but I was like, okay, I can get behind it. From the Lightning, who seemed to be the main character, I was like, okay, she seems cool, kind of like a female version of Cloud. But that's I like her design, and the other characters look, they look cool too. But I don't know, something about the world though and all that, it wasn't quite hooking me that well. So I was sort of like fake hyping myself up for this game, right? Because again, I was still a pretty huge Final Fantasy fan. Well, the game ended up coming out, and the reviews started coming out and all, and they weren't horrible, but they were just talking the way they were talking about the game though and all, and how it's changed a lot. Mm. As far as from what we've known of previous Final Fantasy games, definitely had me a bit worried on it. And ultimately we played it. I played it, and I ended up beating it within a few weeks. And it was a bit of a chore to get through. I mean, ultimately, I like the game. I do. I don't hate it, and I really actually like the combat system. But that you're just kind of going down these corridors when there's not a whole lot to do on them, and some of them can drag on for a while. It definitely starts making the game feel tedious after a while. And even with the fun combat system, there's only so much of like, where you're just doing the same thing over and over, that it starts getting boring. And I mean, what ended up pushing me through was the combat was probably the main thing, because it was fun. And the graphics too, also, like I said, they were really impressive, and the music as well too. Those were all pretty good. But anything else though, it was a bit of a chore to get through though. But yeah, definitely it was a bit of a slow burn of a game and all, and the story was something too that I always used to look forward to in Final Fantasy games. But this one, I never really. I mean, I get the gist of what's going on in it and all. It just never really grabbed my attention too much and all. But I still pledged through it and all that and all. And if anything, I will say that the final section I thought was actually pretty cool. The song that is used and the final boss fight and all that was pretty cool. But yeah, unfortunately, it is probably one of my my least favorite Final Fantasy games. But I still enjoy it though for what it is and all. Um, but Final Fantasy 13. Let's see. But then after that, so we go to let's see, what was the last one that I picked here? Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker. So Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker. So this game came out. Oh, I don't know the exact date actually on this one. Was it 2010 or so, somewhere along the lines of that? And so Peace Walker. So we had gotten we had Metal Gear Solid 4. Well, that came out in 2008. So I would say maybe 2010 or so is when Peace Walker came out, give or take. And it came out on the Sony PSP. And it definitely breathed life into that platform there, as it seems to be one of the more popular games on there. And I played it actually, when it came out on the remastered version on the PlayStation 3. So that's the version that I played. And I got quite a bit of ways into it. but I don't know, there's something that I didn't quite understand too much of it and all. Kind of a beef that I have sometimes with certain games is when you're fighting enemies, particularly probably bosses and all, but where they just seem to take forever to take down. And I remember going through some of the boss fights in this game, and I was like, okay, I'm not understanding if I'm doing something correctly, but it's taking a ridiculous amount of hits to bring it down, and all. I'm wasting like crazy resources and all. And my understanding, I think, is because this game was sort of meant to be played multiplayer, and so you're having other people help you out. Is maybe while I was struggling with some sections, but I did remember that being frustrating on it. So this game, I definitely feel like it would have really benefited to have played portably, where you're just, and also where you are playing with other people too, because that seems to be what the game was structured for. I was playing it just strictly single player, and also maybe I missed out on some of that, the potential of this game for that. But kind of the same thing with Final Fantasy 13, actually, now that I think about it, on this game here, why it didn't really quite stick with me is with a Metal Gear Solid game. I had already been. We had these really great games, right? From Metal Gear Solid to Metal Gear Solid 4. All of them were really fun, but also told very deep, complex stories to them. And also, that's kind of what I expected in a Metal Gear Solid game. Now, I'm all for that. For this one, they were trying to, add more, that was trying to be more gameplay centric, I guess. But I feel like the story though just kind of I don't really remember a whole lot about what happened in the story, and it wasn't really quite the gameplay, like I said, right now wasn't quite revolutionary for it to say that that I can overlook the story elements of it being weak. Whereas, like, let's say, for example, part five, right? So this sort of seemed to be the framework for what part five would eventually become, the Phantom Pain. Now, that game is a game that I can say right there that the story is kind of like there's not much to it, but the gameplay is really involving and all that. So this game tried to be something like that and all, but it just seemed like for me, it was just a little limited in scope overall, probably because of the system that it was out on, right? And all they can only do so much, but it's not bad from from what I can gather on it, and definitely a game to worth at least checking out. It might be something you'll get into. Hideo Kojima did write the story on this, so it is, I guess you can say, like canon. Where like the other PSP game that came out, Portable Ops, I don't know for sure if that one is considered canon or not, but so at least there's that, right? And on the story to this one does tie into the events that happened in Metal Gear Solid 5. So, if you're new to the series and all that, just kind of know that, right? If you go straight from 4 to 5, so if you play the series all the way through, right, and all you play 4, you're into it and all that, and then you go straight to 5, there's going to be a bit of a disconnect in there and all because you're like, wait, what's going on here and all. It's because a lot of the stuff is explained in in this one here, Peace Walker. But for the time, the graphics were actually pretty decent on him and all on the PSP. Had um, more limited in scope, but like the textures and all that, and like the character models and all were fairly somewhat comparable to like something that you would see on a sixth generation system. So it was pretty impressive for that there. But yeah, I mean, it's worth checking out, but probably not one of my more favorite Metal Gear Solid games. But yeah, so that's the three games that I have here. So I will talk about those on my little YouTube Shorts thing that I got going on. So again, the channel name is just under Arcade Amigo, and just trying to get that going there. See if anything can come of it. Honestly, like I said, it's just kind of fun for me to just put stuff on there and all as a sort of way to archive things. Um, but yeah, let's see. So let's get into now for just modern gaming stuff here. Um, so this past week, been going through Clair Obscure, and so I'll just say that I beat um, the first act. So, oh man, I got thoughts on this game. One thing I do want to say, and I made a little note for myself here and all, is that I think, yeah, in the previous episode, I said that I wasn't, the music just kind of, I liked it. I mean, I think it's beautiful music and all, just kind of seemed like it felt out of place, so and all in this game. I wrote a note here for myself, just basically saying, shut the fuck up. I don't know what I'm talking about. This music is amazing. So what happened was I came across this boss fight, and I just thought that the music that was playing on it and all was just really outstanding. Kind of a, I don't know, it's almost like new age like and all, and but almost techno-ish. I don't know. It just it went so well with this boss fight, and just the mechanics of how you fight the boss and all that. With the parrying, the dodging, and all. It just really made it very engaging, and I was like, okay, okay. I was like, all right. Whatever I said last episode about the music, I was wrong. It's a great soundtrack. Um, and so I mean, I've been liking it. I do. It's I just I played through this part in the game. Again, I don't want to spoil anything here, but I'll just say that I made it to Act Two at the beginning. Mm. And I like it. I do. I guess I just have to see how this all plays out, because there's a lot about it that is really good. The see, and I hesitate on some things and all this, that for some reason this game isn't just hooking me the way I thought it would, or the way it seems to be, engaging a lot of people, which I think is great, right? I love it when a new IP can have this effect on people, but for me personally, like, oh, let me see. Let me try to talk through this. So, I like the battle system. I think it's good. Like the I know I get good and all that, but the window to parry some of these attacks, it's really small. And so I mean, I've been able to parry a lot of attacks and all that, but at the same time I miss a lot and all, and I'm just like, geez, like you have to be really, you know, um on it, right? And all to be able to pull off some of these attacks. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, that's kind of what I talked about Hollow Knight, right? And all that, you have to be continuously engaged in the game, right? Like it's not just something you can passively play. But but man, some of the stuff to just try to get some of these counters and all is a bit difficult. And I don't know if I'm doing something wrong and all, because kind of like what I said about Peace Walker is that some of these enemies in this game, and this is just for like some of the normal enemies, they seem to take a little bit longer than I would like, right, to get through them if they're just like your regular enemies. Where, like the amount of damage that I'm doing, I was like, okay, it's not a whole lot of damage. And I've been upgrading my characters, my weapons, and all, and, been messing around with all the different moves and all. So I don't know, maybe I'm doing something wrong. But like the part that I played through last night, I was going through it and I'm like, okay, so I was like, I have to fight this other enemy and all, they're gonna take a little bit, and I mean it's not a huge amount of time that they take, because it'll tell you like how much time it took you to beat a enemy. And so I was averaging like at about 4 or 5 minutes or so, which for me seems a little excessive for just like your regular enemy. And and I don't know, but I guess the good thing is that there's not a whole lot of enemies, and and you see the enemy, right? And also, it's not like it's random encounters. So again, not the end of the world, not the end of the world, but just something that kind of holds me back a little bit, right? On truly loving this game. Um, and as far as the story goes and all that, I will say the acting is absolutely amazing on this. The All the actors and all are really, giving their all. And obviously this is a story and a project that they all really had a lot of passion for, and I absolutely love that aspect of it. But and it's not bad for no means. Like I played through this part yesterday, and I'm like, okay, cool, like that's okay, okay, like that's like it still has me intrigued, right? The overall mystery, I guess you can say, of the game, but it's not quite like hooking me though. Like completely. Like it's like I like it, but I really want to love this game though. But like I said, I'll save my final thoughts and all that for, hopefully I'll be able to beat it here at some point soon. But I'm kind of feeling like falling out of it too. Also, it's like I don't know. It's just something about it that just throws me off. I can't quite put my finger, but I know I'm in the minority. Anything that I'm saying right now, please just this game is really beloved by a lot of people, and I understand why. Definitely give it a shot. And the fact that it's a brand new IP made by a small team, and I was watching a bit of like how this game came together. It's truly a miracle almost. And I love the fact that it's a very passion project and all that. And the music, I guess, whatever I said last week, whatever, right? The music is really good in this. Definitely give it a shot, and all. So I hope that what I'm saying here doesn't steer you away from not trying it out if you haven't yet. But again, those are just my thoughts on it, here kind of early on. So, um, But yeah, let's see. Something else like came out recently too. I almost bought it, but I might hold off on a little bit on it and all. But it looked really intriguing though, and I was just browsing through the I think through the eShop, and I came across this game that came out fairly recently, and it's called Buy Sweet Carol. So BYE, and it's I mean from what I can tell, the gameplay seems to be kind of like the clock tower game on the Super Nintendo, where it's a side scroller, but it's kind of like a puzzle game, and you're ultimately trying to avoid certain enemies, and it's got a bit of a horror theme. But the graphics on it, the aesthetics of it, and all that, it's very reminiscent of like like the old hand animated Disney cartoons or something from like Don Bluth and all. And it looks really stunning and really unique and original. And I really wanted to try this game out, but again, I'm just trying to save my money at the moment, right? And all, I'm not trying to. I wasn't planning on buying too many games this month, but it's for $20 right now. Though it's on sale. I think normally it's for like $25, but it really looks really cool. And I was watching some reviews on it and all. And people seem to, for the most part, really like it. So maybe I'll check it out here at some point. It just looks very original and all, and definitely caught my eye. Something that I hadn't really heard about, or no, I hadn't heard about it until, like I said, I was just kind of browsing through. I was like, oh, what is this Buy Sweet Carol game? And then, like I said, I just started looking things up on it. I was like, oh wow, this actually looks really interesting. So, um, yeah, but maybe I'll grab it here at some point soon, though. Um, um, but let's see. The other thing too, also, so the Xbox ROG Ally X came out. Well, the reviews did anyways. I'm not quite sure when the system comes out or if it's out already, but people seem to like it. I mean, it's definitely a powerhouse of a portable system, but it doesn't seem to offer too much more than what the ROG Ally already did, if you have that one. And it's pretty expensive. I mean, the more elite version comes in like at $1,000. I mean, that's Jesus, that's a lot. That's a lot of money to ask for something like that. And so I think this is probably going to cater to a specific, more niche audience because that is a lot of money. But it seems like because my thought I was kind of interested in it, right, and all that. Maybe I would consider getting something like this, but that is a lot of money. And the other thing too that I was like, maybe I can, if I were to trade in some of like my Steam Deck, and because I did buy the ROG Ally also for fairly cheap when it was on special, and I got the open box version too, so I got it for fairly cheap at Best Buy. But I was like, maybe if I trade those in, if I have to pay like next to nothing, on the ROG Ally, maybe I'll get it. But now when they announced the price at $1,000, I was like, no, that's too much. But and then also the other thing too is that I was hoping that maybe it would have is that the UI experience, that it would be really more console like friendly. And from what I was reading in the reviews and all, it's not bad, but it's definitely, you can still tell it's like a PC and all. And that was one of the gripes that I had about the original ROG Ally, is that it's I don't know, it's just not the most user friendly and all to use on a portable device and all, especially something that doesn't have like a trackpad and all like the way the Steam Deck does. So yeah, I'm gonna hold off on that. I don't know if I'll ever get it and all, but yeah, but it did come out though. So for anybody interested in it, the other thing I wanted to talk about too also is, so I'm going to talk about a game that's a retro game that I talked about a few weeks ago, but a little issue that I'm having with it that relates to more modern gaming, I guess. Well, not modern gaming, but just the way we play games nowadays. But so a few weeks ago, I was talking about Panzer Dragoon Saga and was playing it for a bit. Well, I ended up playing it more, and I got to the end of the first disc, but I apparently the way I had my game set up on my emulation devices wasn't correctly done for like multi-disc games, because I got to the end of the first disc, and so then when you have to switch over to a different game, so I'm playing it through RetroArch, and it's just not letting me. So on there, it gives you like a little message that you have to put the games like in a playlist of some sort and all. So I'm like, great. So I'm gonna have to do a little bit of investigating on that and see how to get that done, so I can continue advancing in that game. So I got to, again to the end of the first disc. I haven't played this game all the way through for a while. I beat it a handful of times back, in the early, or I'm sorry, the late '90s, early 2000s when I had the original copy of the game and I was playing, on the original Saturn more. So I was wanting to go through it again, because when I started playing it a few weeks ago for the my little roll of gaming thing here, I was like, oh yeah, I remember how much I love this game. But yeah, hit kind of a roadblock with that though. So maybe something I'll try to do sometime this week and see if I can figure out how to put those games in some kind of a playlist apparently to access go through the game right when you're having to switch through multiple discs. Um, Another thing too, also that was kind of making a bit of the rounds in the gaming news is so GOG, good old games, or I don't know what it stands for, but basically they're a PC storefront where it looks like they dedicate a lot of their game library and all to try to preserve games, right? It seems to be kind of their main thing, is preserving games. And so somewhat recently they had the ports of the original Resident Evil games, so I think 1, 2, and 3, I believe, that were put on their storefront for that, which is cool. But they, in some kind of an interview that happened, they were interviewing one of the guys from GOG Games, I guess one of the leads there. And so he was talking about how they really had to fight to get these games on the storefront because Capcom didn't want to at first, because more or less, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but what somebody from Capcom had told them was that, why would you want these games when the remakes are already out there and they're just much better? So that caused a bit of a backlash, right, and from the gaming community when a comment like that was said, and rightfully so, because part of, like I said, part of what I'm trying to do with this little podcast here and all is to do what I can as far as like for video game preservation, and like I'll take for example Resident Evil 1, the first one. Yeah, I prefer the remake, the Resident Evil remake, the started off on the GameCube and then has its modern ports here and all. But I mean, for me, it is better. But I don't want the original to go away. I mean, I can, like, if you're just a casual fan and all that, and but you wanted to go to the Resident Evil games, I would probably recommend and all that, right? That that you play the more modern one. But there's plenty of people out there though, and all that like to go back to that original one because it is a different feel. I mean, it is so that kind of makes it seem like a different game. And it just boggles my mind how, for some reason, video games, well, maybe not just video games in general, just a lot of things nowadays seem to be, kind of like a one and done, like, let's just discard them. It's not that big of a deal. And where, I mean, there was a lot of time that was put into these games and all back then. And there's, it's kind of a, to just say that we're not going to continue trying to preserve these and all. I think that eliminates part of the video game history and forgets on how impactful these games were that eventually set the stage for like these remakes to come out and eventually got Capcom to where they're at. So it is disheartening, right, to hear that from actual companies when they're making comments like that on their older games. It's just, I think that as gaming now has become more of a service, right? You get your live service games, your free to play and all that, where they seem to be treated just kind of more like a one and done, and all, and like, okay, whatever, let's move on to the next one. But there's a history there, and that many devoted fans latch on to because they were just great works that they made back then, and so that the fans have to sort of try to step up to preserve a lot of their history. I mean, it's just one of the things now and all where, not only in video games, I mean, you're seeing it in a lot of different things, but it's just the nature of a lot of companies nowadays and all where they just don't really seem to care about their product. They just care about the money and all. And it's just kind of sad to hear something like that. And also I can understand why there was a lot of upset people with the comment that they made. It's like, guys, like, yes, the remakes are pretty good and all that, but the originals definitely have their own appeal. Like for like, so again, for Resident Evil 1, I do prefer more the newer one, but like, let's say Resident Evil 2. I mean, the Resident Evil 2, the remake, it's amazing. It's great. But I really like playing the original one too also. And they're just two different flavors, right? And all, and so I would, and Resident Evil 2 was a very landmark title. It was and also it just boggles my mind how they would just wanted to, disregard it like that. So that was, like I said, right. It was a bit disheartening and all, but again, I'm sure a lot of us are just kind of used to these kind of things nowadays, right? And also, is what it is, I guess. Um, but yeah, let's see. But yeah, but just wanted to make a quick little mention on that. And so, last thing too, also that I did want to talk about here. Let me see. Let me look at my notes here, make sure I'm doing this correctly. Um, oh, did I not make my notes on this? Okay, well, let's see. Um, Sorry for the wait. I just want to make sure I get the pronunciation on this right. Okay, here we go. So, unfortunately, we lost a pretty big figure in the video game industry with Tomonobu Itagaki. He's mainly known for the Dead or Alive or the newer Ninja Gaiden games. So, starting with Ninja Gaiden that came out on the Xbox back in 2004. And he's, I mean, he was definitely from what I understood back then and all, I remember reading, back in magazines back then and all, like when, a lot of these journalists and all were going to the E3 events and all that, that he seemed to be had a kind of a rock star sort of persona about him. Seems like he might have been a bit cocky and all that and all, but, definitely made some excellent games though. I mean, I will still say that Ninja Gaiden, the one that on the Xbox, well, the one that originally came out on the Xbox, was truly, I mean, the gameplay on that and all is some of the most tightest, funnest, most polished action gameplay ever in a video game. And yeah, I mean, he really made his games look really stunning as well too. I don't know how much he was involved in some of the later Ninja Gaiden games, like Ninja Gaiden 2, 3, and for example, how much of a hand he had in the newer one that's going to come out here this week for Ninja Gaiden 4. But yeah, I mean, he'll be missed. He was definitely a very talented programmer, and he died fairly young. I mean, he was born in April 1st of 1967, and looks like in Tokyo, Japan, and just passed away on the 16th. So this past Thursday of October. So he was only 58 years old. So you know, I mean, it's unfortunate, but he definitely contributed some pretty amazing stuff in the video game industry. So definitely thank you for that. Um, but let's see. So I'm seeing here kind of something here like let's see. Okay, so this is um, a statement that Team Ninja put out on this. So we are deeply saddened by the passing of Team Ninja's first leader, Tomonobu Itagaki. Um, we will carry on the philosophy and creativity that Itagaki-san began and continue to create games that many will enjoy. Our deepest condolences for his loss from everyone at Team Ninja. Um, so somebody's saying here in the comment section here, uh, so Takaki probably didn't stay in touch with anybody at Koei Tecmo after their public breakup. So so there must have been some kind of a fallout. Okay, I think I remember hearing something like that some years ago. But well, dang, that sucks. Rest in peace, man. And thanks, yeah, I mean, thanks for your contributions to the video game industry. But yeah. But yeah, let's see. But yeah, on that note, though, right? Again, I don't know how much of a hand he had in Ninja Gaiden 4, but that game is coming out this week on the 21st, actually. So here in about 2 days. And so from what I've heard and all from the previous, it seems to be getting a pretty good feedback. So yeah, so I don't know. I probably won't get it right away. And since I don't have Game Pass anymore, so I might try to play it at some point later. But yeah, so that's what I got here for modern gaming stuff. So let's go back in time. Not too far back in time, as we're getting a little bit further ahead in our years as we're cruising along here. So we're in a new decade now. So in 1990, So we're trading in the hair rock bands and the acid wash jeans and all that for grunge music and gangster rap and oh, what else about the 90s? You know, basically we're in a whole new decade now and all, and so there was definitely a new energy going into this decade. I do remember that back then, and that led to video games as well too, right? So we're starting off in the fourth generation, and so you can almost say that 1990 was kind of like the start of it, right? Because the TurboGrafx 16 and the Sega Genesis. Oh, I mean, they had been out in 1988 in Japan and all, but as far as worldwide, they came out like in mid '89. So really, you can say like 1990 was like the first main year where you know fourth generation was in full effect, right, and all across many territories around the world. But yeah, let's start digging into 1990 for video games. So 1990 saw many sequels and prequels in video games, such as Metal Gear 2, Solid Snake, Dr. Mario, Dragon Quest 4, Final Fantasy 3, Phantasy Star 2, and Super Mario World, along with new such titles as, Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon, and The Blade of Light and Magic Sword. The year's highest grossing arcade video game were Final Fight in Japan and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in the United States. The year's best-selling system was the Game Boy, while the year's best-selling home game system or home video game was Super Mario Bros. 3 for the Nintendo Entertainment System. So in the arcades, so the highest grossing arcades here. So let's see, it looks like number 1 was Final Fight, number 2 was Tetris, number 3 was Super Monaco GP, number 4 was Columns, number 5 was Parodius da Shinwa Kara Owari. Number 6 was Raiden, or Raiden. Number 7 was Blockseed. Number 8 was Final Lap. Number 8 was Final Lap. Number 9, G-Lock Air Battle. And number 10 was Gradius 3. So here in the United States, highest grossing arcades, it just has number 1 as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And number 2, 3, and 4, it just has Super Off-Road, Turbo Outrun, and Mercs. It also shows Capcom Bowling, Final Fight, Big Event Golf, Cyber Police, eSWAT, and Badlands. Let's see, best-selling home systems. So number 1 was the Game Boy, which shows here 10 million units. I had read something else, though, that it didn't actually hit 10 million units until 3 years into its lifetime. So I don't know which one's accurate, but 10 million that I'm seeing here, I did see it in a video, and then also it's shown here on Wikipedia. So I'm not 100% sure what's accurate on that there, because it shows 3,100,000 sold in Japan and 5 million in the USA, and then in Europe and Korea unknown. So yeah, not sure. I guess I'm not sure what that's all about, but it sold a lot from what it looks like. So for the Nintendo Entertainment System, came in at number 2 with 8,640,000. Number 3 was IBM PC at 2,840,000. Number 4 was the Sega Mega Drive Genesis. So it was up to 2,136,000. And let's see, for the PC Engine TurboGrafx 16, it was at 1,750,000. Number 6 Macintosh was 1,300,000. Number 7 with the Master System was 1,205,000. Number 8 was the NEC PC 88 at 1,100,000. And number 9 was the Amiga with 750,000. And number 10, the Commodore 64 was 700,000. So best-selling home video games in Japan. So number 1 was Super Mario World. So the Super Nintendo came out in 1990. I'll probably just touch base on it. Maybe actually, I probably won't mention it too much here because I don't know too much about it as far as when it came out in Japan. So that'll probably be more for next year. We'll have more information on that. But it looks like Super Mario World out of the gate, right, was already selling really well. Probably because it was a pack-in title. I'm pretty sure it was in Japan. I'm not sure though. But number 2 was Dragon Quest 4. Number 3 was Final Fantasy 3. And so actually for Dragon Quest 4, so it shows here, so these are in Japan figures, but it shows that the Dragon Quest 4 sold 3 million, where Final Fantasy 3 sold 1,400,000. So it kind of goes to show how much more popular Dragon Quest was over there, at least at the time. And 4 and 5, it's just showing Dr. Mario. Number 6 shows Final Fight, the Super Nintendo one. Number 7 shows SD Gundam. And number 8, F-Zero. Number 9, SD Hero. And number 10, Quicks. Let's see. And in the United States, so let's see, just kind of breaks it down by the months here. So it says January, it just shows Tetris for the Game Boy, and then skips some months, and then April shows Super Mario Brothers 3. Actually, Super Mario Brothers 3 going from April all the way down to December. So yeah, so see Super Mario Brothers 3, so shows here that, I mean, let's see, what does it say here? So 500 million adjusted for inflation. One down one. I'm not understanding what it says here, but it looks like it sold quite a bit though. But yeah, let's see, game of the year. So it looks like they're showing here Final Fight in the arcade and Dragon Quest 4. Well, that's in Japan, and then here in the United States. So for like Electronic Gaming Monthly, shows game of the year was Strider for the Sega Genesis. But then another video games and computer entertainment had Phantasy Star 2 as game of the year for console, and it came from the desert for computer. So cool. My beloved Phantasy Star 2 did get game of the year in some sections. Let's see. So just some things that happened this year. So the Consumer Electronics Show, CES, is held in the Las Vegas Convention Center in January. So NEC and Sega respectively unveiled prototypes for the the Turbo Express and Game Gear handheld consoles, while more than 35 titles are announced for the Game Boy also. Codemasters reveals an audio CD player compatible with the NES. Manufactured by Samsung and to be distributed by Camerica in the summer. Camerica also reveals the Power Pack, later known as the Game Genie. Sega announces that 20 third-party titles would be released for the Sega Genesis by the end of 1990, as well as continued development for the Master System. David Pomji establishes the first FuncoLand location in New Hope, Minnesota in August of that year. Let's see, publication of the Swedish language video game magazine Nintendo Magasinet begins. On March 8th, the Nintendo World Championship begins. And then Nintendo versus Color Dreams lawsuit. Nintendo sues Color Dreams over unlicensed production of Nintendo video games. So Nintendo is starting to do their lawsuits here. And Toy headquarters merges with Trinity Acquisition Corporation, forming THQ. New companies, Eidos, Interactive Studios, Team 17, Revolution Software, but defunct are Tynesoft. Let's see. So for hardware releases, so let's see. So the the Turbo Express released their handheld console towards the end of 1991. So Nintendo releases the Super Famicom 16-bit consoles in Japan. So SNK also released the the Neo Geo Advanced Entertainment System, AES for short, for the home console. Let's see, September 28th, Nintendo releases the Game Boy across Europe. And then October 6th, Sega Game Gear Color handheld is released in Japan and is launched in North America in 1991, so the next year. November 30th, the Sega Mega Drive is released in Europe. Okay, so yeah, I got it later. And then Amstrad halts production of the ZX Spectrum, ending that platform's 80-year dominance in the UK home market. Interesting. And Amstrad introduces its only console, the Amstrad GX 4000, which fails to garner interest and is discontinued the following year. Alrighty. So let's just kind of talk about games then. And so with the Genesis, right? So this was a interesting year for the Sega Genesis. I think it was an important year too, because the Sega Genesis started off fairly strong, right? It had a decent lineup of games. And again, I say this here in the North America anyways. But this was before Sonic. and before the Super Nintendo came out. But we knew the Super Nintendo was coming out. It was already out in Japan. And so if Sega was going to have any chance to, compete against Nintendo, they really needed to do some stuff here, right? And this is the year before Sonic came out, and they're probably already, because what I know, and I don't know the exact time frames. This is just from what I read in a book called The Console Wars and all, and where it talks about a lot of like the behind the scenes stuff and all from like what Tom Kalinske was doing and all that. So again, I don't know if this all happened in 1990 and all, but it was happening around this time where so Michael Katz was the CEO of Sega of America when the Sega Genesis launched, and so he was the guy behind like the Genesis does with Nintendo, and I think he was also responsible for getting some major celebrities endorsements to Sega. So for example, um, Joe Montana, Pat Riley, Tommy Lasorda, Michael Jackson, and so he was getting a lot of these big names. So it's like, okay, well, if we don't have like a mascot, let me get these celebrities on board and all that, right? And so that's where you started seeing Joe Montana football, Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, Tommy Lasorda baseball, Pat Riley basketball, Jack Palmer, I think. Excuse me, Arnold Palmer, I think, golf. So he was signing on some big names. So he was making some moves, but apparently something about that Sega wanted like 1 million consoles, I think in the US. And I don't know if he hit that. I don't think he hit that goal and all. Excuse me. So ultimately he was kicked out. And so then one of the main people of Japan, Sega of Japan, he flew over to. So the way I understand the story goes, and this is by this book, Console Wars, that I read, right? Which my understanding is that this book kind of embellishes some things too, also, but more or less, it seems like this is kind of how it happened, where one of the main people of Sega of Japan went over to try to track down Tom Kalinske. So Tom Kalinske, he was a big figure for several companies before. He was involved with, I think, the dude that was kind of behind the Flintstones vitamins, also helped propel Barbie back into the limelight, and also He-Man as well too. So he was sort of the main figure that was making a lot of the business decisions with all that. But he was on a bit of a break, and so he was out in Hawaii, I think, and with his family vacationing, where the CEO of Japan tracked him down and basically offered to fly him over to Japan so he can see what's going on with what Sega had cooking. And so he, with the blessing of his family, Tom Kalinske went along with it. And after he saw what he saw over there, he decided to take the job working as a CEO for Sega of America. And so Michael Katz was out. Tom Kalinske moved in. Looks like there was a bit of a. Doesn't seem like Michael Katz was obviously too thrilled about all that, and all more so for the decision of Sega instead of. Doesn't seem like he had a personal beef with Tom Kalinske and all, but that's just from what I understand and all. I mean, because obviously he kind of helped Sega get off the ground, right, and all, but looks like it just wasn't enough. And then Tom Kalinske eventually took off. So Tom Kalinske was more the figure like from when Sonic started coming out. And also this might have all been happening 1990-ish, 1991-ish or so, give or take, right? I say that all to say, though, that 1990 was kind of an important year, though, for the Sega Genesis because, again, this was before they had Sonic, but they needed to start establishing themselves to some extent before the Super Nintendo started coming out here in America. And then until they can get some kind of a mascot off the ground, right? Which, again, would later become Sonic. So this year, though, it was a decent year for the Sega Genesis, though, and because we had some games that were going to become pretty popular on it, and that helped it at the very least stand ground to the Nintendo Entertainment System, and kind of show like, hey, this might be a potential player in the video game market here, but. One of the things that really helped the Sega Genesis during this time frame here was that they were able to get games from EA Games EA Electronic Arts. So kind of what I understand of this whole scenario, and again, this is from what I'm remembering from this Console Wars book. So again, sorry if I get some of the facts wrong, but so Trip Hawkins, he was the CEO of Electronic Arts during this time. And so they were making, so I already talked about that there was a John Madden football game, right, on the PC before. And so that name seemed to have started garnering a bit of a popularity because, again, sports games here in the United States are going to be a big deal, especially football games. Sorry, they were already starting to, there was a want for them, right? And because America's football is a big deal here, right? And also, if you can get a good video game from that, well, that's a you have a hit there. And so, what I understand is that somehow the Trip Hawkins and developers over there and all that were able to reverse engineer the Sega Genesis, where they were able to make games on it. Sega got wind of that, and looks like they weren't too happy, but ultimately Tom Kalinske and Trip Hawkins and their staff, right, basically had a meeting, and they came to some kind of an agreement where it's like, okay, all right, so you were able to crack our code. How about we make a deal? You put your games on our system and all, and we'll give you so much of a cut or something like that. Like I said, I don't know those specifics on it and all, but after whatever that deal was, Electronic Arts was able to put some of their games onto the Sega Genesis. And so their carts look a little bit different, where they're more taller and they have like this yellow sort of like tab on the edge of on the side of the cartridge. So that's why they were just kind of more unique looking cartridges than the regular Genesis games. And so one of the big hits that they had that they ported over was John Madden Football on the Sega Genesis. And I have so much nostalgic memory for this game here and all. And see, this was around the time that I was starting to get into football. And so we bought this game. And yeah, just immediate. I mean, it was a big reason why I really fell in love with football, right? The sport. Where eventually, as I got a little bit older, I did play it in. I didn't play it in high school, but I played like in junior high and all. And I should have kept playing it. It's just that, again, my family couldn't really afford to, put me in high school football and all. But the times that I did play it, I actually did pretty good for junior high football, whatever that counts for. But I was a running back, and I did pretty well. I had some long run touchdowns and all that, and I was considered like the main running back for. So had I played in high school and all that, there's a good chance that I might have continued to have been the main running back for the little town that I was living in. So again, just my little Al Bundy football story. But basically, a big part of the reason why I did continued liking football was not only from what I was watching on TV and all, because eventually my dad was a 49ers fan, and so that was like when Joe Montana and all those were doing really great. So that's what lured me into football. But then I had some older cousins and all that they were big Raiders fans, and then I found out about Bo Jackson, and so then I ended up becoming a Raiders fan. And then, like I said, in 1990, at some point, whether if it was 1990, 1991, where we got John Madden Football, that there continued my love for the sport there. And but this game, I really loved it. When I go back to it and play it, like the scaling effect and everything, like the depths of field on the gridiron and all that looks fairly smooth, still. The voice samples I still think are some of the best on the Sega Genesis back then. And it's fairly basic, but but it plays in a way where it feels um pretty well designed. Like previous football games are kind of a mess, right? You have all these players moving around and there doesn't seem to be any real structure to everything and all. But this one, the AI and everything and all, I mean, it really feels like they were able to get a football game that behaved like an actual football game. And then the tackles and everything, the way you can break from tackles, like if you're the running back, or the impact of everything and all with the sound effects, it made it for just a very fun football game. And again, a game that actually felt like a football game. And so it was a big deal, and started a partnership with Sega that John Madden Football ended up becoming the premier football game, preferably on this platform on the Sega Genesis. And again, sports games are kind of a big deal here, and so it was a huge reason why the Sega Genesis found a lot of success. And it started with this here, and luckily that it got this advantage here early on, that it could still stay afloat right and all for before the Super Nintendo ended up joining the new challenger in the next year here in the United States, that that the Sega Genesis was not falling too far behind, right? But yeah, John Madden Football, it was yeah, a lot of fun memories with that game. I remember so I used to like playing it a lot, and then I had my brother who was a few years older, and then his buddy. They would come over and play that game quite a bit, and so we, my brother and I, we shared the same room, and so I would go in there right and all because I'm trying to hang out with my brother, and all and his friend, trying to be, like the cool little brother. And so we had this fun little thing where um I would they would play the game and then I would act like the announcer. And so whatever I was saying back then as the announcer and all, they thought it was kind of funny as I was just kind of joking around and all that. So they let me stay on. And so we were even recording some of it. And I wish I still had the tapes of, whatever my dumbass was saying back then, just to like try to add colorful commentary to their game. But yeah, a lot of fun memories with this game here and all. And it's definitely started a legendary franchise here for sports games. But we also had another game too that became one of the more popular Sega Genesis games early on, and that's Mickey Mouse Castle of Illusion. I played this game. I haven't played it a whole lot. I think this. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think this is a game that I originally played it at Wheels and Wings place I've talked about before. But it's a fun platformer, with Mickey Mouse. Again, it was one of the licenses that Sega got early on, right, for Disney, and it is a fun platformer and definitely one of the more popular Sega Genesis games. And yeah, I mean it's a fun little platformer. There's really nothing negative I can think about it and all. Again, I haven't beaten the game. I've got a few stages into it, but just never got around to beating it. But yeah, I mean, from what I played, I mean, it's not like a Mario game, but it's fun though. It's a fun little platformer game. But then we got the port of Golden Axe on the Sega Genesis, which, pretty comparable to the arcade and does include like an extra level. So, does have that going for it. And then there was also Alien Storm, which came out on the arcades. I don't know if the Genesis got a port in 1992 also, but it would have been shortly after. Um, and then there's Space Harrier 2, and I used to play this game quite a bit on the Sega Genesis. I remember still a buddy of mine coming over to play it. So again, he had the Nintendo, I had the Sega Genesis, and so he got to experience Sega games over at my house. And I remember this game playing a lot. Kind of a silly little memory, but so if you've ever played Space Harrier 2, so you'll notice the like the way the enemy shots look like. And so for some reason, my friend and I, we would think that we were like in some kind of a food world where like the blue round lasers that they shoot at you, we were thinking those were like onion rings. The kind of orange fireballs that they shoot, we thought that was like burnt cheese. um, and then there was like some of the things that like the obstacles in your way, they were like salt shakers and just stupid things like that. I just remember that him and I playing that game. But yeah, had a lot of fun memories playing that one. But then we also had Strider on the Sega Genesis, and this is another big hit for the Genesis again in its pre-Sonic lifetime. So Strider was kind of a big deal because so at that time Capcom wasn't quite, I don't think so anyways, but I don't think Capcom was quite developing games for the Sega Genesis yet. But they were allowing Sega to program some of their games right for their platform. So starting with Ghouls and Ghosts last year, um, Sega developed that game, and same thing with Strider. And they did a pretty good job on it, and so it was kind of a big deal because it was I'm pretty sure I guess I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that it was the first 8 meg game that was released. And so that was just kind of a big deal back then and all, because it's like, oh, now we're up to 8 megs on this. And so, yeah, so I just remember being kind of a big deal for that and all. There was another game too also that I was thinking about, Forgotten Worlds, but that kind of the same thing. It was a Capcom game, but it was developed for the Sega Genesis by Sega. But that came out, looks like in really late 1989. So I'm looking it up here. But yeah, but Strider though, and I mean, it was almost arcade perfect. I mean, if you compare the two, the Sega Genesis to the arcade, I mean, they're pretty spot on. And so it was just a cool way to play a really cool arcade game that was still fairly new, because I think Strider came out in 1988 in the arcades originally. So the Sega Genesis version was only like 2 years old at the time. And so to get a near arcade perfect port of that game and all, was pretty impressive then. And yeah, I just remember it being a big deal. And well, as you saw, I think in the previous thing that I talked about earlier was a game of the month or a game of the year for EGM. So yeah, that was a pretty big hit for the Sega Genesis in this early time in its lifetime. But then we got, for me personally, right, what I think is just an amazing game. And admittedly, a lot of this is for nostalgia and all, but it's still one of my favorite games of all time, and that is Fantasy Star 2. Oh, excuse me. So again, RPGs still weren't quite that big of a deal here in the United States, but this was one of the early on examples of where I was getting myself really hyped for a game because again, we really loved the original Fantasy Star. I thought it was an excellent game. And so then when we started seeing screenshots and everything that Fantasy Star 2 was coming out, and this time it looks more futuristic and all. And again, this was kind of a, usually we would think of RPGs as being more medieval setting like, but this is like in the future and all. So it definitely looked unique in that. And yeah, so it came out this year, and Phantasy Star 2, it's a very difficult game. The dungeon designs on this game are very, I mean, they're pretty insane, where just to try to beat them without like a walkthrough and all, I mean, it'd be almost like just sheer luck, especially some of the later dungeons. I mean, they're pretty insane and all. So I'll admit the game is a bit rough and all, but the story I think just holds up incredibly well, especially like if you compare it to like things going on in society nowadays and all. And I mean, obviously it's very basic story and all as far as like the character development and all that, but just the overall plot that it's trying to tell, I think it's still to this day very unique and one of my more favorite ones, honestly, in a video game. It's I mean, the social commentary behind it all, the just kind of what's happening, that again kind of mirrors things that are going on nowadays and all. And then the ending to it, I think is really fantastic actually. And there's certain moments in the game that just really stuck with me to this day, and it's definitely one of my all-time favorite games, and it's truly amazing. I really wish this game would get like a more of a proper remake because the game was a bit rushed. Like the backgrounds were, I thought that they were just going for like a certain futuristic look where it just has like this blue grid and all, but from what I understand, it was because they were just limited on time and resources as far as to like give a more proper detailed backdrops when you're fighting, in the battles. But I mean, there was a remake that came out for the Sega Ages lineup on the PlayStation 2. And what I've played of that one, it's okay, but I just wish I would get more of a proper remake and all, because again, this one was a bit unfinished. But even as it stands, though, and all, just one of the most magical experiences I've had in a video game. And I remember a buddy or a cousin of mine introduced me to a friend that had this game that I would ride my bike almost across town just to borrow this game and all. Um, so, because I remember being so hyped to play, because I never actually owned it back then. I just borrowed it from a friend. It wasn't until later that I bought myself a copy of it. But yeah, just excellent game. And if you want to check this game out, I will say this. It is a grind, right? It is a tough game to get through. But there is a way you can try to modify it a little bit to make things a little bit easier. So if you were able to track down a Sega Genesis 2, a Sega Genesis Mini 2, there's a Fantasy Star 2 on it, and it has an option where you can speed up your character and you get more experience points and money on it. But you can also mod a ROM copy of that game to give you those options too, also on an emulation device. So just, there is that option as well too. That definitely makes things a bit more easier. But yeah, Fantasy Star 2, just, it's just an amazing game. I absolutely love that game. But yeah, let's see. We also had some things going on here with the Super Nintendo. Oh, I'm sorry, not the Nintendo, the original Nintendo. Because the original Nintendo was still doing really well, right? It was. I mean, let me double check something here. So here in the United States, Super Mario Brothers 3 had come out here in 1990, because it came out last year in 1989, but here in the United States, it came out in 1990 and was a big hit. I would say that from what I recall from back then, and again, video games were still fairly, I mean, they were starting to become popular, but it wasn't until later that they really started becoming popular. But let's see. So yeah, so from what I'm seeing here, so Super Mario Brothers, so it came out in 1990 here in the States. Excuse me. And so we talked about it before, right? Where it was originally shown in that Wizards movie. But yeah, it was just I mean, it was a big hit. Definitely still helped the Nintendo, or the original Nintendo still, kick some butt in the video game industry. And yeah, I mean, just with that game alone right there, right? It sold a lot of copies. It was a big hit. And yeah, I mean, there's the game became legendary, right? Um, but the Nintendo, though, aside from that game, it was also having a lot of cool games that were still coming out on it. So, for example, in this year, so we had, let's see, but we also had River City Ransom, Batman from Sunsoft, Super C, Ninja Gaiden 2, Dragon Warrior 2. And okay, so again, this is in North America, and then Final Fantasy came out also in this year too in North America. Crystalis, Rescue Rangers, Mega Man 3, Journey to Silius, Castlevania 3, Dr. Mario, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2. So that was all that came out in this year here on the Nintendo Entertainment System. So again, that system was still cooking, right? And definitely wasn't ready to go out into the limelight still and all. Because again, the Super Nintendo had just come out in Japan, but here in the United States, the Nintendo was still like the main system. Even though the Sega Genesis was starting to pick up some steam, it was still, the predominant system was still definitely for sure the Nintendo. And so they were definitely still accommodating for that system during this time. But something interesting though that I found out was I'd kind of known about it before, but as I was a little bit of research that I was doing here, I came across this information here. But the Game Genie, so this device basically was able to let you cheat, right, on some games. So what I found out was that this device was involved. So this comes later in 1992. So if I don't touch base on it, then I'll just talk about it now. But basically, so there was a lawsuit between Louis Galoob Toys Inc. versus Nintendo of America Inc. Looks like the court eventually ruled that because the Game Genie didn't infringe on Nintendo's copyrights, because it didn't permanently change the work of the game or it didn't impact the sales, they were able to still distribute this Game Genie. And so it looks like because of this decision, it helped to reverse engineer, or basically helped establish that reverse engineering is fair use here in the United States. So it looks like it sold pretty well at about 5 million units. But looks like so it was just a Game Genie that came out, but eventually it did come out with similar devices like the Action Replay, Codebreaker, and Game Shark, that later came in, kind of in place of that there. So yeah, that was kind of cool. But then and then the TurboGrafx was still pumping out some pretty decent games. It was still trying to hang in there. And the Sega Master System, I mean, it was trying to do its thing too also. I mean, it had like games like Psycho Fox and all that was somewhat popular on there. But other than that, though, it was the Nintendo all the way. And then, like I said, the Sega Genesis was starting to take some of that limelight. But games that I kind of recall playing a lot this year and all when the arcades was eSwap. I do recall liking to play that game in the arcades. And I don't think I think I might have played a little bit of it at Wheels and Wings on the Sega Genesis version, but never actually owned it though. But I do remember liking that game a lot there. So I think I already talked about Mega Man 3, that it came out this year. And so it was a bit of an interesting year again, right? Where the Sega Genesis was, trying to find its footing and all, but things were going to really start cooking next year as we get into the console wars, the Sega versus Nintendo console wars. So for anybody that, has heard about it, but you're new to gaming and all that, it's definitely the most cutthroat console wars that was out there. I mean, basically it was, I mean, if you get a chance, read the console wars book. And it's a fun read. Again, they do embellish some things on there and all, but for the most part, a lot of the things that they talk about did happen. And it was just two companies that were going at it. And the fun thing about it was that these were two companies that were mainly video game companies, right? So nowadays, I guess you can say the console war is between like, Sony and Microsoft, but these are companies that, that's not their sole purpose. Although the PlayStation has become a big part of Sony's business, Xbox doesn't seem to be, Microsoft doesn't really seem to care about it now, or I don't know what they're doing with the Xbox brand, but but basically, like if their systems fail and all, they have other things they can fall back on. Where for Sega and Nintendo, video games was their thing, and so they were able to. The way they could compete each other was just basically by putting out the best games, right? And so you just this is why the fourth generation is one of my favorite, because we just saw a lot of quality titles, and it's a really fun generation. But yeah, we'll get more into that here in the next week. But that's what I got for today. So hope you continue having an excellent week, and we'll see you in the next one. Later.